things. And now I want to get into my talk, which I don't know how this happened, but it's called The Path of No Preference. Because I've been thinking about that a lot this week, this idea of not having any preference for whatever experience is happening. And it's challenging. It's a challenging concept for a lot of people, this idea of no preference, because it sometimes people take it as they think it means they can't have goals or can't want to achieve anything or do anything. We just become these little blobs, like just kind of bouncing around from here to there. And we give up our aspirations, we give our hopes up and things like that. But it doesn't mean that. It means we lose our attachment to needing things to be a certain way right now. And the idea of no preference is really helpful as we unravel our conditioning. And it's really tied into this idea of the second noble truth, where the Buddha says, the first noble truth is there is suffering, there's birth, there's death, there's loss, there's all these things that are just the normal human condition that we're all going to experience. We're all going to experience loss. We're all going to die. We all have people who have died. And there's joy and there's sadness. There's all these things as a human being, but there's this extra level of discomfort and suffering, dukkha, which is usually translated as suffering, but is also translated as discontent with the way things are. And I really like that one because suffering can mean a lot of things for different, and not everyone can relate to that. But in Bhikkhu Bodhi, when he was translating some of the suttas, in the preface, he talked about the person who did the major translations in the last century, decided that he was going to have one word equal one word. The one word, like dukkha in Pali, was going to equal suffering. So he let go of any nuance, because it doesn't always go, A to A, B to B, always. So discontent, unhappy with the way things are, is also what dukkha means. And so it's helpful, especially right now, I think, for me this last week, because it's been crazy train for a couple of months. And this last week, I really was been sitting with this no preference, and not giving up on the idea of ending suffering or ending to work injustice. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means, how do I hold this moment? How do we have, how can we be present with the quiet that's next door now? That all of a sudden is quiet. So it's like, how do we hold that? And, it's not that, as I said, it's not that we abandon our ideas of what the Buddha taught, wise action, not intentionally taking a life and ending injustice where we see it, and cultivating compassion. We don't let go of those things, but in this moment, we let go of needing it to be a particular way. We don't abandon skillful behavior. We don't abandon, there's the idea of skillful and unskillful, and we try to move in a way that is skillful, that's wise, that's non-harming. But if this moment is really unpleasant, is bananas, and we're reacting to it, that's what the invitation of no preference is, to let go of the reactivity. Jack Kornfield has a quote. I found this quote, and he said, "The unawakened mind tends to make war with the way things are." The unawakened mind tends to make war against the way things are, especially if we don't like it. I think last time I was here a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned Gil Fronsdale's definition of patience is only necessary when we don't like what's happening. So there's a lot of this not being okay with this moment, and that's where this extra level of suffering comes from. So if we can be in a place of no preference, we can simply be with. I mentioned that earlier, sati, just be with. And years ago, I was working with a teacher, and she would say, and if I was talking about something that was going on or some memory that was happening, and she'd say, okay, she'd stop my train of thought and she'd say, what are you feeling right now? What's the experience in this moment? Is there something? And I'd say perhaps something like there's a heaviness in my chest. Perhaps there's anger, sadness, grief, whatever it is. She'd say, can you connect with that feeling? Does it have a weight? Does it have a texture? Does it have a color? What's it like? What's that feeling like in the body? And I would be there, and then I'd start talking about, yeah, but I can see that if I do this, then it will, and she'd say no preference, because that getting lost in the mind is trying to mitigate the moment. Instead, can I simply be with this heaviness? And when we learn to be, or whatever it is, and when we learn to be with that, sometimes it shifts, sometimes it changes. But we didn't have to do anything, we just bear witness. Oftentimes bearing witness for the first time ever to these things that have been deeply buried. And you know, if you've been practicing for a while, that these things tend to arise. When we sit, there's this in our bellies or whatever it is, and the mind immediately goes into if I had done that, or if they had done that, or blah, 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 blah. Instead, let go of the stories and be without that reactivity that I talk it, what it, Jack Kornfield says, making war with the way things are. I talk about having a fist fight with reality. We never win a fist fight with reality. Reality is always reality. It's how we greet it. It's how we greet it. It's an invitation. And this is one of my favorite definitions of equanimity. It's a deep intimacy with our experience without preference. Equanimity is this capacity to be intimate with the moment at hand without preference for something else. In this moment, this is what it's like. In this moment, this is what it's like. I was talking about how helpful it is in practice. And this morning in practice, I have a couple of cats, and I have a little a water fountain for them to drink. And it's in the room where I meditate, and it was being very noisy this morning. And I was getting annoyed. And I was thinking, no preference, no preference. And I thought that would be a good example. I didn't realize we would have an even better example today. And I was trying to do that this morning too, because the mind is, oh, this is really good practice. Okay, enough practice. And then, you know, I'm done with the learning. Now be quiet. And then going, no preference. And when you can actually access that idea of no preference, the reactivity can fall away. So there's an ease, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's unpleasant, there's an ease that arises. And we can there's a spaciousness that we can hold the unpleasant. It's like years ago, I mentioned I used to teach at the center, and before I was teaching a class, and I was refilling one of the 5-gallon water bottles, and I accidentally dropped it and it shattered, and I got the mop out, and I was, you know, luckily it was near a door, so I was sweeping the water out the back door and going, oh, look at how equanimous I am. This is great. And I'm gonna mention this in class. And then there's the water, and it kept going. And I'm like, I'm done with the equanimity. So it's like, you know, it's like we just have to keep coming back. Oh, look, I got pissed off. I got I was okay for 5 minutes and now I am done. It's like, oh, come back, come back, come back. Just keep, this is the practice. Sharon Salzberg said once, I was sitting a day long with her, and she says it's a practice of returning again and again and again, because when we get lost in that story, we're somewhere else. We're not liking what's happening. So, and I want to go back also to this, what I said earlier is this idea of when we have no preference, we think that it means we get rid of our desire, our wanting. And often I hear so often that desire, oh, if you're a Buddhist, you can't have desire. And I gave a talk last week. I teach online also in my own little group. And last week I talked about being a Buddha, not a Buddhist. And it's like, oh, if you're a Buddhist, you can't have desire. And it's like, no, the Buddha actually taught about there's two kinds of desire. There's the desire that he talks about in the Second Noble Truth, this craving, tanha, which is translated as thirst. It means thirst. We have this thirst for something, and it's born of ignorance and delusion. It's like, that's going to make me better. That if they stop singing, I will live happily ever after. Because that's where we may not be explicit in that, but oftentimes that's the underlying idea. If this checkout line would only move faster, then I'd be okay. Or if Washington, D.C. fell in the ocean, the world would be a better place today. You know, and we may get what we want in the moment. And we have all gotten what we've wanted, but we haven't lived happily ever after because the mind's constantly craving. But then the Buddha also talked about the desire that arises from wisdom and intelligence and clarity, which is chanda, which is a skillful, wholesome desire, the desire for liberation, the desire for all beings to be free. And that is what moves us to action as necessary. Wise action, skillful action. It's grounded in the teachings in the Eightfold Path, in as I said, wise action, skillfulness, skillful behavior. But the foundation of equanimity, this capacity to be fully intimate with what's happening, that allows us to move through the world without that extra layer of suffering. I'm reading, somebody recommended, and I started reading last week, the Book of Joy, which is a conversation between the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And it's really excellent. It's really excellent. It's actually, I didn't know what to expect, but it's really quite good. I'm about, I don't know, maybe almost a quarter of the way through. And both of these men have been through tremendous suffering in their lives. The Dalai Lama was thrown out of his country, and they live as refugees because China took over Tibet, and Desmond Tutu was raised in South Africa, a black man in apartheid, and part of the reconciliation after that was, abolished. And so they both come from a place of great suffering, and they talked about how they can hold that suffering with compassion because they recognize they are connected and everyone else has suffering. So it's not, their suffering is not just I, me, mine, but they look up and they look around and they have a spaciousness to hold what they're experiencing because they see all people are experiencing so much. Their hearts expand because this is not just a practice of clarity and wisdom. It's a practice of opening our hearts as well. So there's this wise heart. I talk about the undefended heart. That's my practice of how do I keep that armor? How do I chip away at that armor that keeps me disconnected, that won't let me be intimate with my experience? That's the invitation of practice to do. And it's not just doing it all at once. I was talking about this last night and somebody was saying, yeah, I can do that, no preference. over here, but not over here. And that's fine. Start where you are. We can't do it all at once. We have to start in this moment where we are, you know? And it's not just with big things, it's with the stories as we move through our lives. Gosh, I think it's 30 years ago now. I got hit on the freeway. My car got, maybe 25 years, whatever. I got hit on the freeway and my car got totaled. I was fine. And it was an old car. I think it was like 12 or 13 years old, had almost 300,000 miles on it. And I used to buy my cars at Hertz used cars. So I went to Hertz to get a new car, and that was an Accord, a Honda Accord. And I said, I want a new Honda Accord. And all they had was a black one. And I'm the person, I go, okay, I want this car, I'm buying it, blah, blah, blah. And I never wanted a black car because it shows dirt. I mean, you look at it and it's dirty. And I was like whining. I'm like, oh, I hate black. Oh, I don't like the car. It's so dirty. I have to wash it and I'm lazy. And I was whining to someone about my nice new, it wasn't new, but it was new to me car. And I said, Mom, and she goes, wow, that's really productive. And I went, oh yeah, it's like, that's the little stuff that we do to ourselves when we're unable to be present. And now I'm going to tell a story that I tell all the time because I find it just shows this so beautifully. I was a mother's helper or a nanny when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, and I was taking care of these kids, and it was Saturday night and the parents were gone, and the girl who was about 8 or 9 wanted a salami sandwich. And I said, there's no salami. So she went full tantrum on the floor, screaming, arms, legs, I want salami. Ah! And I just stood there going, there's no salami. I mean, we can't do anything. But that's that inability to be with the moment. There's no salami, but damn it, I want salami. And so there's the suffering, there's the disappointment that there's no salami, but we don't have to add that extra level. So when we live, so the preference, there may be a preference for salami, but if there's no salami, I don't freak out. I don't lose my equanimity, which allows me to stay open, create space, especially now. And that's why I think this has been coming up for me this week, because it's so bananas and there's so much. And I'm like, no preference. Obviously, I want things to be different. Obviously, I'm working to do what I can where I am with what I have, in the time I have. That's what we do. But in this moment, I can scream and shout, and that's valid. If that anger arises and we get all twisted, that's absolutely valid. But for my nervous system, I want to move to a place of no preference in this moment. And if preference is a word that just doesn't land, and sometimes it doesn't land with people, change it. Find something that does. This is the thing about a language, because we all have different experiences in the world, and different words mean different things and have different histories for each of us. So find something that makes sense. Like for me, suffering is not a good word to resonate, but discontent with the present moment, that's like, hell yeah. So find a place that you can land, not so much in what the word is, but the experience of it. Letting go of thinking this moment has to be different. Tomorrow, yes, but right now, how do I hold the reality right here, right now? How do I hold this space in this moment? Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, somebody asked what the meaning of papancha, at least I don't, maybe it was you, about papancha, which is one of my favorite words. It means that proliferation of thought. That's when we get lost in our head. And so if you can be on the lookout for that, and be willing to let go, because some of these thoughts are so seductive. No, I want to play this one out. I'm not ready to let that go. You know, eyes wide open. No, that's what you're doing. It's like, no, I'm not interested in being present. I'm not interested in letting go, but know that's what you're doing. So there's a clarity in this. There's an intentionality, because that's where the freedom is, when we're not trapped by our conditioning, by our reactivity. Yeah. And there's a quote I have here from Christina Feldman, which I really like too. And she says, there's a definition of craving, and she says craving is the servant of the belief in insufficiency, that we come from this place of lack. And that, I think, is born of the culture we're in too. Not enough, more, you can do a little bit better, productivity, this kind of stuff. And it's not, we are enough exactly where we are. We may not be where we want to be, but we're okay right now. And I heard Angela Davis in a thing a few weeks ago, and she was talking about to be in this world. She was talking about to be in this fight with what's going on right now. We have to believe we're bigger than we think we are. I think I was talking about being a bodhisattva. And that quote is like, we have to be bigger than we think we are, which means we have to build the capacity to be present, to be here, and to let go of those stories of lack and not enough, and if only, and you should, and you're a bad Buddhist because you drive a fancy car, and Buddhists don't drive fancy cars or whatever. I've heard that. I've heard people say that, not about me, but about, I can't believe that teacher drives a Cadillac. Yeah, you're going to hear that. Don't judge. See for yourself. This is the Buddha's beautiful teaching. Don't believe it just because I say it. See for yourself what leads towards suffering and away from suffering, towards freedom and away from freedom. So anyway, I think that's all I want to say. It's just a practice of being in this moment, totally being in this moment. And sometimes it's only for a moment. I mean, we can't walk around like all the time, like hanging on to the moment. But there's a mindfulness. And when something is really kind of pushing us in a direction, that's when I stop and I go, no preference. How do I, that's my gateway to holding something. That's especially if it's unpleasant. Sometimes it's holding the pleasant too, because some of us have difficulty with that. Ooh, I don't deserve the joy in this moment. If any of you are experiencing that, that's bullshit. Hold the joy, be with the joy where you find it. It's really important. I was driving downtown LA yesterday. I was going to a march, and I drove by Dodger Stadium. I drove by the exit Stadium Way, and I got such a thrill because I'm a baseball geek. I don't like the Dodgers at all, but it's baseball season. And I'm like, 3 weeks till I go to a game. And so that brought me joy. And I went, yeah. So be with those moments too. Right now, it's like this. No preference, just joy. No judging, just be. So anyway, my friends, thank you so much for your kind attention. I really appreciate it. And I'm happy to hear any thoughts or comments, any questions. So I think Valerie will be here next week. I don't know. I swapped with Valerie, and then I think she swapped with Ian. So I'm not sure. Just show up. It'll be great. And then we have the Tuesday evening, and the rest of the classes are online. We have Tuesday evening, meditation as refuge. And then Wednesday, there's the peer-led group. And then Ian does metta on Friday afternoons. And all that info is on the website. If we are, there's a couple of baskets in the back for Donna. which is how you support us, and we pay rent here every month. And so there's a basket for helping support Insight Community of the Desert, and then there's a basket to support the teacher, who is me today. And online, I've put the link to the donation page on in the chat if you are so inclined. Your generosity helps to keep us going and keep this. This is important stuff right now, folks. Really important. So it keeps me from falling and lying in a fetal position on a regular basis. And then volunteers. We are also a volunteer-run organization, and there's a sign-up sheet in the back. We can always use help on Sunday. So if you want to, it's really simple. And Mizell sets up the chairs. All you need to do is like put out baskets and help count the money at the end, and that's pretty much it. And then put things back in the box. They even leave the box here, and we don't have to do anything. But we really need you. So if you're interested, and that's a form of dana, that's a form of generosity. So we'd love your support. And if you'd like to help in any other way, if you're interested, and we always need folks to do various things here and there. So yeah, let us know. So we build our community. Even if you're online, you can help us in various ways. We have a lot of members who don't live in the area. So and there's cookies, please eat them so I don't take them home. Anything else? Did I miss anything, Terrence? No? Oh, I'm doing a half day on March 15th, Saturday. It'll be here at the Mizell Center. So that's like a time of 3 hours of extended practice. So when you can register for that, that's on the website. You can register, you can just show up. I love those half days where we just get to sit and walk and sit and be in community. So, okay. Anything else? You were just gonna talk about the half day? Oh, thank you. Yeah, so thank you again, my friends. And again, reminder that we don't just practice for our own benefit, but we practice for the benefit of all. May all beings be free. Thanks, everyone.